welcome to the American Woodshop. I'm Suzy Phillips.
And I'm Scott Phillips. Today's project is a century-old corner shelf made out of mahogany.
And I'm going to use this mahogany scrap wood that we found for $5 to cut that out.
It's fine grain and it's perfect for this. Don't go anywhere.
The American Woodshop with Scott Phillips is brought to you by
Woodcraft since 1928, providing traditional and modern woodworking tools and supplies to generations of craftsmen. Woodcraft, helping you make wood work.
Craig, from the first cut to the final assembly, providing woodworkers with products that help simplify woodworking challenges. Craig.
Gorilla Glue for the toughest jobs on planet Earth.
For dry hands that crack and split, O'Keeffe's Working Hands. Easy Wood Tools, American-made tools for all skill levels.
Life's too short to have ugly furniture, so I always have an eye out for gems, keepers, and this we found in an antique shop. It's a scrolled mahogany masterpiece. It has Chippendale influence here in the fretwork, because I've seen this in Chinese architecture that Chippendale copied, and yet with the floral work that scrolls up into the fretwork, it's just a gem. And then there's this tight little veining here to accent these sharp cuts. And so the way to work with this is to get the right sort of wood. And we can screw this all apart. There was no glue in this, and we'll do that. But Suzy, let's talk about this board. If you can come in close and take a look at this. This is a leaf out of a table that was stripped down and never used. $5. And this grain is super tight, and it will carve and have detail.
It's going to be beautiful.
The other thing is this board has some heft to it. Okay, so that means it's dense, which means it's going to be strong in those delicate areas. So from here, we'll pull out any of the metal that's in it, and then we'll head to the bandsaw to resalt down. And while I'm working on that, Suzy, why don't you get started in screwing these pieces apart very carefully, okay?
Sounds good. With an old piece like this, I want to make sure to take it out carefully. So I'm going to use this handheld screwdriver to kind of loosen these up. And then I can go in there and use the cordless. Okay. Just take your time, because these are old screws, and it's a beautiful piece. There we go. That one's out. And I'll get all these taken apart, and then we can draw out our pattern.
It really makes me feel good when you can recycle boards. Now that's the last barrel that's been extracted there. No metal in this piece here of mahogany. And the whole idea of this was a leaf to a table at one point in time. What I'll do, right down that glue seam, I'm going to take this right off, and that will net out the workpiece, the good wood, one board wide. And for me to do that, I have to lower this guide block assembly all the way down so that this is as close to the surface of the board as possible without having the two touch. Also, be sure to read, understand, and follow all the instructions that come with the tools and products you use in your wood shop. Work safely. Be smart. These are safety glasses. And I will get hearing protection on. It's fully tensioned. That's good. And now we'll turn on the dust collector, because the bandsaw is a dusty tool. Let that come up. And now we'll make this rip cut to tune it up and make sure this fence is cutting true. That's a 1/2 inch wide 4-tooth blade. Just that nice and straight. As long as I keep it against the fence, give that blade a chance to carry away that sawdust. And now what I can do is crank this all the way up so that with this auxiliary fence, a jig, that's hooked onto the rip fence, I can bring this face over to the blade and set it back just the thickness I need with this gauge right here. I can carefully ease that up to the blade, lock that down. And now for the thickness of this material, which is a hair over 7/8, I can bring this board up. I've got clearance there. Make sure that column is locked, whatever you do when you resaw like this. And now, with good push blocks, and on the outfeed side, a feather board set up to keep the workpiece snug against the resaw fence. I never put this in line with the blade. If I did that, could put pressure on the side of the blade. That'd be bad. So this is well behind the blade, locked in, to help keep that where it needs to be. One little adjustment there. Looks good. Like that. And now I'm going to cut this right in half. It's very important to have two great push blocks to do this. And those are excellent. And here's a quick test. I won't turn on the dust collector yet. Turn it on, flat against the fence. I'll make an initial cut. Stop, back it out, flip it around. And it's dead on, and it is. We'll go right in that same cut. So that's perfect. I'm ready to resaw this. That board's very flat, so that's good. No metal in it. So as I make this, dust collector's on now. Here we go. Hold this flat against that blade. And everything's square. As long as I keep this board flat to that fence, and I give that blade a chance, carry away that sawdust, it'll be perfect resaw. So, straight from the bandsaw, you can see these perfectly resawn boards, and that certainly is much better than planing them down and wasting all that wood. And what I can do here is show you the fence that mounts onto the bandsaw fence. Pocket holes here and here, that's at a right angle, and that notches right over the fence, and it's screwed onto it. And that is a great jig for anybody to make. So, now, Suzy has all these pieces taken apart, and we'll see her carving later on. These details, these screwed apart beautifully, cleaned up nicely with alcohol. And I made a template out of 1/4-inch plywood, so that what I do with that is just lay out the pattern on wood that is just shy of a 1/2 inch thick. And you can see I've already done that on this workpiece. And I've scrolled out the rough shape on this beautiful mahogany, reclaimed. But here you can see I've actually started to pierce cut these areas inside, following the pattern line. And to do that, we're going to use a scroll saw. And you can see I've drilled holes here. And I like to open it up with a countersink a little bit, because here's that number 7 blade that goes right through that hole, like this. You don't want to bend the blade. And you bring the arm down, like so, and you push that fine number 7 blade into the jaws of the chuck, tighten it down with the key. Whoops, operator error there. Have to make sure that's forward before you lock it. Now I can tension it and add more tension with the tensioning knob back here, and we're ready to start making some cuts. But first, I want you to see something. This is so cool. This is what scroll saws look like in the 1920s. You bolt that down and away you go. Or you could put a belt onto this pulley, take that knob off, and drive it either by foot power or by a motor. But scroll saws have come a long way since this early design. So set that out of the way. Thought you'd like seeing that. It's amazing. This one has a 20-inch throat, which we're going to use every bit of, because to start the cut, you swing it all the way up to the column, and here's how it goes. And I bring this puffer up and position the nozzle so it blows away the sawdust as I start to make the cut. And let's get to some action here. When you're cutting on a scroll saw, what you want to do is leave the line. I'm coming into a corner right here, and as long as I use the back of the blade as a pivot, I can bring it right down and around this sharp corner like so. And then when I come to take this bend right back into that curve, again, I want to pivot right on that blade, and you want to use the side of the teeth to file your way right around that curve. So here's a sharp point. I'm just pivoting it on the back of the blade. That's flat. I'm not a big proponent of spiral blades because they have a tendency to go wherever they want to go. They follow the grain. Now I'm bringing this back around and pivoting, and now I can make a straight cut. I'm using my left hand to help guide the board, and now as I'm going down that straight line, I have to adjust the feed to work with that number 7 blade that has 10.5 teeth per inch. Now when I'm coming up here where it's a super sharp point, there's a different way I like to make that happen. I back out of the cut, I come down and around like this, and I swing it in to that point. And that gives me a crisp point, an acuminate point as it's called in forestry terms. And I want that to pop right out of there. So I put a little side pressure on the blade, it pops right out. And I throw that onto the workbench. Now here we go, we're gonna, you don't want to throw the scrap on the floor because that'd be an ankle twister. Now I'm using the flat of the blade to bring that smooth cut that was already made up to it, and now I can sweep this on around to that sharp point. And don't forget, you have to work with the wood, with the density of the grain, because wood varies in density, spring wood, summer wood. And so what you want to do is give that set of those 10.5 teeth per inch, number 7 blade, a chance to carry away the sawdust. When you're selecting blades, here we go, we're going to cut this piece free again. We'll come right up to that point. There we go. Put a little side pressure, slick as can be, and then I can pivot this right on around in that opening. And maybe I can make this cut to the throat. Maybe I can't. I can't. Okay, so there's always a different way of doing things. I'll come here into the scrap, and we'll bring this down as far as I can. And then I'll swing this up and around, and I'll open that up, and I will whittle away all these pieces until we have this opened up. Take your time, get comfortable. I don't like to sit down, I like to stand up. It gives me more control when I'm working on pieces like this. There you go, we'll turn that off and release the tension a bit, ease that right off of there, and away we go. So, we'll cut the rest of this out, swing this around. You can back up in cuts on a scroll saw with it on or off. It's not like a bandsaw where you have to turn it off when you are backing out of a cut. You can back out of a cut on a scroll saw and it won't get you in trouble. It's much more forgiving. And some folks who use a scroll saw will tell you the key is the blade. Well, number 7's the blade to use on thicker material like this. But the other thing is you have to tension it properly. And let me turn this off, and I want to show you something. You can tell that this is on dust collection, and it actually works on this scroll saw. But I want you to listen to this. Hear that? I need a little bit more tension. There you go. High C for this to really do the job right. Now I can finish this cut, And you know everything there is to know about using a scroll saw now. You have to tension it properly. If you're having problems following the cut line, you either have the wrong blade or not enough tension or both. Okay, so I need to swing this right on around. There we go. And that's all there is to it. So, to pierce this through another hole, what we do is bring this arm up, bring this up and pierce that blade right on through there. And I repeat this process a total of 26 times on this template for this corner shelf. And okay, we'll swing that up, add more tension. Oh, didn't have this tightened down enough, so watch this. You release the tension knob, swing this forward, crank the tension knob until the very top of that blade is at the top of that metal offset. Press it into the back of the chuck assembly. Make sure the key is tight. Bring more tension up, and away you go. That's the process right there. I'll just cut these out. So here is my final piercing cut, and as I go to swing this corner right here, look what happens. The workpiece is too long, it would hit the back of the saw. So I back out of the cut, swing this around, keep the blade in the opening, and the back of the blade that has no T, I bring that back into a previously made cut, and now I can not only make a sharp corner, but I can figure out a way to do absolutely all of these piercing cuts with a traditional number 7 blade. And you want to cut out of a cut, that's done right there. Release that, pull the arm up, oh, easy does it. And you can see I just kinked that blade, which means it will be fatigued and we'll have to put a new blade in. But look at that. Now the final thing is to scroll this outside shape, that's very delicate, be careful there, and come up here to this Scott Phillips edition, the curly Q that was non-existent on the original. So here we go. I'll change the blade out and then scroll away the outside edge, and from there it's over to the router table. Here I'm using a scrolled flower accent right on around, leaving the line so Suzy can carve down to that. And there you have it. Turn that off, and you can see that's one half that's a little bit thicker to accommodate this other half, and that looks really good. But this face and this face get routed profiles on this top edge, just the top edge right here, all the way around. But before I can do that, it's time to make the shelves with this scallop edge design right here. And we'll use the same setup to cut this out. You can see the guards all the way up. I'm using finger pressure down to control the workpiece. The guard is there to keep my fingers away from the blade, but really the key is hold that workpiece down as you make these cuts. So let's scroll this out, all 3 shelves. Leave the line. That way I can sand down to it. And you do look about 1/4 of an inch in front of where you're actually cutting. Where you're cutting, you can't do anything about that. But you can guide that blade better if you're looking about 1/4 of an inch in front of where you're going. Takes a little bit of practice to do that. But, hey, the more you practice at this, the better you will become. So cut out all the shells. Now, if you can see that bit, it's got a ball bearing guide, and I've rolled this work surface in here so that I can profile the edges of the shelf. That's top edge. And I'm using these clamps to hold down everything, putting a shim underneath this in order to raise it enough so that bearing doesn't hit my work surface. And because of the rotation of the cutter going this way, I'm working from left to right on the edge of all the shelves, and I also profile the outside edge of the scrolled parts of the corner shelf, outside only. So I'll make all those cuts. And this table is a perfect height for me. You can adjust the legs up and down to whatever suits your need, but also it's locked in. So make all those cuts with good dust collection. Now, Suzy is the master carver around this house, okay, and or in this wood shop. And what I want you to look at is this flower stem here that scrolls in here and down here and down here. And everything else is geometric. And so, Suzy, give us your tips about what you're going to do.
Well, I'm going to use a series of knives and gouges to really just sculpt over these round edges just like they've done in the original, to really make it come alive, and try to go with the grain where you can. If not, sometimes you're going to have to pull it towards you. But just like this, you can see how I'm really getting in there and it's rounding over that edge. And I just keep working those away. And then there's some places where I'll need to use my V tool and this little valley right there, and then I'll just work that right on through.
And that separates it from the geometric form that you can see here and goes into the natural form.
Yeah, because they did a lot of beautiful carving on that. So I'm just going to keep referring back and forth, switch up using the different knives, and it's going to be carved and it's going to look awesome.
And one thing I have learned, even though this is her carving, when you have a lot to take off, a longer handle is a wonderful way to make this chisel part of your arm. So you can pare down, in this case, an area that should be rounded over where the router came through and profiled it. And that took it off very nicely, but now it needs to become that flower accent. So Suzy and I'll work on this, sculpt it down, and the other thing is I have to go get the other piece ready. So what's your final tip, Suzy, about how this is going to come together?
Just take your time and have fun with it. That's the most important thing. Always be safe in your shop, wear a Kevlar glove, but just think about the natural, what a real stem relief would look like, and you can't go wrong.
I've cleaned off all the sanding residue, and this is called a sanding mop. Alternates grit there, 80 grit, and that is the easy way to feather over the rounded parts. And once I have that all done and then cleaned off with the tack cloth, it's on to finishing. And keep in mind, the original had garnet shellac on it, and that's what mahogany looks like after 100 years of aging, with cooking oils primarily building up on the surface. So you start, in this case, with garnet flakes, de-waxed, means a higher grade. You mix that 50-50 solid flakes and denatured alcohol, stir it for 3 days running, and then you decant it in an equal measure of alcohol. Do not stir it until you have an equal measure done, and you stir it nicely. And then the way this goes, that's a 1.5 pound cut right there. And what I'll do now, since this is clean, with an all bristle, natural bristle brush, I'll brush this out. And this will give me not only the right color on the mahogany, but it fills the wood grain as well. So I'll just brush this out on all the pieces, and then once it's dry, we can screw them all together. Okay, Suzy, it's a moment of truth. I have the parts all screwed together with 1-inch long, fully threaded wood screws.
Looks beautiful, I love it.
Okay, and it's really important to finish it before you put it all together, and to that end, your template gives you all the drill hole locations so that everything stays square. And there you have it. You can see this back one piece is screwed to this side piece. I see I have one more screw hole to drive into that shelf right there. and have everything secure. So here's the finished look.
I love it. Creating our own original.
Can't beat it. And it helps if you have a pro carver in the house.
Oh.
Nicely done, Suzy.
It's a lot of fun. It really is.
Corner shelves. Now on to next week.
Next week, we're building a beautiful hard maple bench.
Okay, you want to join us then. Thanks for being with us today. Stay well.
Woodcraft, since 1928, providing traditional and modern woodworking tools and supplies to generations of craftsmen. Woodcraft, helping you make wood work.
Craig, from the first cut to the final assembly, providing woodworkers with products that help simplify woodworking challenges. Craig.
Gorilla Glue for the toughest jobs on planet Earth.
For dry hands that crack and split, O'Keeffe's Working Hands. Easy Wood Tools, American-made tools for all skill levels.
For more information behind the scenes at the American Woodshop, go to our website for complete details on tips and like us on Facebook.
And away we'll go on the